The title of my research paper is Facing Othello, Ira Aldridge's Role in the Evolved Representation of Shakespeare's Moor. My research at the Newberry Library focused on the visual representation of Shakespeare's play Othello and the character Othello throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. In the 18th century, artists developed illustrations of Othello through painting and printmaking. Although Othello debuted in England in 1604, illustrations of the play did not emerge until the late 18th century because English book illustrations developed slowly. In early productions of the play, white actors who performed as Othello portrayed him using blackface. As a result, artists represented Othello through Shakespeare's gaze because they were inspired by his text and live productions of the play. However, in the 19th century, Ira Aldridge portrayed Othello in Europe. His identity as an African American actor introduced a complex representation of a Moor in 19th century productions and transformed the image of Shakespeare's Moor in visual culture. In 1600, an unknown artist honored Ambassador bin Muhammad Anu with an official portrait to commemorate his state visit to England. He visited London as an ambassador from Barbary, a region in North Africa that includes modern-day Morocco. He is represented in an oil painting titled The Portrait of the Moorish Ambassador to Queen Elizabeth I. The portrait of the ambassador set a significant precedent for representing Moors in Elizabethan culture. A Moor was considered a native or inhabitant of an ancient region in northern Africa. Francesco Capello created a geography lesson, which is possibly the first known painting of a scene from Othello, probably the first illustration of Shakespearean drama to be created outside England, and one of the very first paintings of a Shakespearean theme anywhere. In the painting, Capello represents Othello as an outsider through contrasting his appearance and personal experiences with Desdemona and her page. In this painting, Othello is not represented as the North African Moor. His deep complexion suggests that his place of origin is another region in Africa. Despite Othello's unclear birthplace in this image, the exotic feather and his pronounced complexion reflect Shakespeare's descriptions of a Moor. After painters created early representations of scenes from Othello, English print illustrations began to develop in the 18th and 19th centuries. A notable figure in the publication of illustrations is the English publisher John Boydell. Among the many prints Boydell collected in his Shakespeare gallery, he included a print by George Noble made in 1800. Noble created the print after a painting by Josiah Boydell, which illustrates Act 5, Scene 2 of Othello. In the illustrated scene, Othello prepares to murder Desdemona while she is asleep in her bed. Noble created the image using etching and engraving on paper, and Boydell printed the image for publication. As possibly the earliest representation of Ira Aldridge in the visual arts, Northcote's portrait presents a counter-narrative to earlier representations of Shakespeare's Othello. In Geography Lesson, Capello does not depict a particular actor in illustrating Act 1, Scene 3 of Othello. Therefore, the character was not attached to any particular identity outside of the composite identity Shakespeare formed. However, Northcote's portrait invites another identity into the representation of Othello. To contextualize Aldridge's importance to Othello's production history, he painted him in Othello's attire. However, Northcote preserves Aldridge's own identity by representing his natural face without blackface. Possibly inspired by Northcote's portrait of Aldridge, artist Henry Briggs painted his own interpretation of him. Matching Northcote's portrait, Aldridge's gaze is directed towards the viewer's left side, avoiding any eye contact or engagement with the viewer directly. Unlike Northcote, Briggs decorates Aldridge in colorful garments. Briggs' portrait mirrors Northcote's work in many ways. In Briggs' portrait, however, Aldridge is less wary and more watchful, as he seems to have more comfort and control in his setting. Further, Aldridge's image was also represented in print. The consistent feature of his representation is his skewed gaze, and this image is directed to the viewer's right. His sword, as seen in the ambassador's portrait and Noble's print, is gripped tightly in his right hand. A notable feature that does not appear in other representations is the crown on his head. The crown possibly references his self-proclaimed identity as the African Roscius. The illustration of Aldridge as Othello again merges his individual identity with the identity of the character he portrays. As a result, Shakespeare's Moor is no longer a victimized character. He is one with power and agency. When Ira Aldridge performed as Othello, he challenged artists to reconcile his pre-existing blackness with his character's blackness. As discrimination and intolerance continue to affect people around the world, Othello can help viewers confront and reflect on their own ideas about race, representation, and otherness. Thank you.